Well, my iPad just clicked over to 4 o'clock, so go ahead and call to order. Are you ready, Wendy, with your tape?
Sure.
Okay. Iowa City City Council Economic Development Committee meeting for Monday, June 3rd, 2019. Wendy, do you have everybody in the room, or do we need to go around and get names?
I will have everybody, yeah.
Okay, since we don't have a huge audience today. Item number 2, consider approval of minutes from the January 18th, 2019 EDC meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Throgmorton, seconded by Cole. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 3-0. Thank you. Item number 3, consider recommendation to the City Council to proceed to establish the Forest View Urban Renewal Area. And Wendy, I guess we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, sounds good. So today, we're just looking for a recommendation to take the urban renewal plan for Forest View forward to City Council. An urban renewal plan would enable the city to consider financial participation in a project within that area. The North Dubuque LLC, represented today actually by Jimmy Becker and Kevin Munson here with us, are owners of the property, and they first approached the city several months ago about sharing in the costs of the infrastructure for that. The infrastructure being the roads, trails, water, sewer, and stormwater elements within that area there. A development agreement, actually, with the details and the proposed conditions for sharing in the financials, though, would be forthcoming after establishing an urban renewal plan. So none of those particulars are within the urban renewal plan. This just sets the stage for that to happen after an urban renewal plan would be adopted. Staff believes there are at least two significant benefits to adopting the Forest View Urban Renewal Plan. One is that there is an assurance that the developer will provide good housing options and relocation assistance for the current residents of the Forest View Mobile Home Court, and that relocation will be offered in a number of forms, either relocation to a new manufactured home within the new development area, or relocation to one of the multifamily buildings also within the redevelopment area, or relocation outside the Forest View development, all with comparable amenities and sizes to what residents currently have. So we feel good about the affordable housing aspects of that being a strong public benefit to the project. The other is the creation of the new Forest View Drive, which will connect to the new development, obviously, but also from Dubuque Street through to Algonquin Drive, and I'll throw a map up of that in a second here, that will provide much-needed secondary access to the existing Peninsula and Mackinac neighborhoods just to the west. This is especially important in times of flooding because residents in those areas have to evacuate because the existing only access now on occasion will get flooded. So this would provide relief to that. If you can see on this map, sorry for its roughness, I couldn't find an electronic copy of it, but it outlines the road concept throughout the development from Dubuque Street on the right, kind of where that red area is, and then up through the development, as you can see, to a roundabout there on the left, and then down. That vertical connects to Algonquin Drive. And this slide is particularly relevant because we, in our conversations with, our conversations with the developer have been limiting the possible participation by the city to just the portion of the road that would also serve the Mackinac and Peninsula villages, Peninsula neighborhoods as well. So I'll trace this a little bit with my, it won't show up here. I thought my mouse might, but from the east side where Dubuque Street connects with the red there, you can see also a diagonal highlighted in purple are the areas that we've talked about cost sharing with the developer on. The diagonal going from top left down to lower right along Dubuque Street's line is actually the trail the developer will be responsible for. Then the connection into the existing Laura Drive there is that red with little black dots on it area. Then it turns north and west and loops around over to a roundabout, which is at the north end of the new Forest View manufactured home neighborhood, and then straight down to Algonquin. And so where you see the purple highlighter and the word eligible, those are the parts of the infrastructure that we've been talking with the developers about participating in. And parts that we are not are Haywood Drive, that you can see there, is not highlighted, nor are the alleys and some of the other roadways that would facilitate the manufactured housing neighborhood as well. So if you were to recommend this to proceed to City Council, the next steps would be for Council to have a resolution of necessity on their agenda, and then you're familiar with the next steps. Then Planning and Zoning reviews the urban renewal plan to check its conformity with the comprehensive plan, which should be a match, I would think, since all that was done fairly recently. And then we also have a consultation with other taxing entities, usually the county and the school participate in those, to talk about the implications of using tax increment financing on development such as this. And then finally, a public hearing in 30 or more days or so after that. If you have any questions on the draft urban renewal plan that was in your packet or anything in the memo, I would be happy to answer questions.
So based on this draft, am I correct in assuming or understanding that the only use of TIF in this urban renewal area or in this urban renewal project would be for the public infrastructure? That's the number one, and then the number two is the engineering, attorney, administrative fees?
Yes. That's correct.
And so obviously, later on with that TIF agreement, we would be negotiating whether or not we're paying 100% of those of that infrastructure or not. Obviously, this has the not to exceed 12.9 million, but all that would be in the actual TIF agreement.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm excited to see it moving forward. It's potentially a lot of money, but that secondary access is incredibly important, and the relocation of individuals who are living in most cases, probably in their substandard housing, to better quality, safe housing, and getting some commercial in that area as well, I think is a real asset to the community. So.
Yeah, it's been a long, hard slog, and this is the next step in that journey. So I'm pretty excited about it as well. I'd like to ask one question, which is to a degree peripheral. Well, it is peripheral to the particular point, but it's relevant to the project. Can somebody, Jeff, maybe tell me where the flood diversion project for Idlewild stands?
Eleanor, have we got the plats on that? So plats are received.
Right. We have received the plats. We have two property owners that we have to acquire property from before the project can proceed. If we would have to go to condemnation, that can be a 6-month process. If we get cooperation with the property owners, then it can be a much quicker process. Right. But you can't bid a project until you got the property.
Sure. Okay. Thanks. I just wondered where that stood. It's clearly a key part of the overall project. So, yeah.
Do you have a sense of what the final dollar figure is yet going to be on the TIF, or is it too early?
It's too early, I think, at this time. You know, we've been given a preliminary set of costs for putting the road together, but we haven't gone anywhere with negotiating that yet. So, and the preliminary cost of the eligible parts of the road in total would be around that 12.9. But like I say, that doesn't include any negotiations from there.
And for the public infrastructure tax increment financing, is that also subject to sort of external review in terms of identifying whether there's a gap or not, or that's not necessary in this particular case?
Can answer that.
Okay.
Yeah, we
That's
wouldn't,
just for,
we wouldn't do a gap analysis in this case. I would liken it to what we did on the Foster Road
yeah, that
extension.
seems very familiar.
And that split was 25-75. So the developers were responsible for 25% of that roadway cost, and the city, through TIF, will reimburse them the 75% plus the carrying cost for putting that in upfront with no upfront city dollars. So that's generally what we've talked in concept with Blackbird in this case. But we need to get down into the details. As Wendy said, they have given us a preliminary estimate. We got some direction from the council during the rezoning process about some design modifications to the road that we'd like to make, and we're going to sit down tomorrow, I understand, and start to work through those. And we'll have to just work through that process and then return to the council with a breakdown of what it'll be. So that I'm confident to say that it's not going to be the 12.9 number that you see. The city won't be responsible for 100% of it. We'll have to work with the development team to figure out where we land.
And my recollection of the Foster project is a portion of those funds that were repaid had to be used for affordable housing. Is that correct? And would it work in a similar way for this one?
Actually, that one was set up as a different kind of urban renewal area. This one will be set up as an economic development urban renewal area in combination with a slum and blight area. And the slum and blight designation and the economic development designations give it a 20-year lifespan on that and don't have the affordable housing requirement with them.
Just want to clarify.
The other one only has a 10-year span, and I think part of it was that needed a set-aside for affordable housing because of the lack of affordable housing on site. Part of the reason we're supporting the road here is because the affordable housing is being addressed.
And then the third point I'd add to that is that type of TIF is infrastructure to support residential development. And while there is some residential development in here, if you look at the roads that we're supporting, particularly on the eastern half of the project, it's by and large commercial uses over there.
Right.
Any other questions?
Oh,
Nope.
Developers have any interest in addressing this in any way? Or?
We agree with the staff.
the trenchant analysis. Impressive, Wendy.
All right, can I have a motion to recommend this to the City Council?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes 3-0. This recommendation will go forward to the City Council. All right. Well, thank you very much. Excited to see this move on to the next step. So, yeah, all right.
Thank you very much.
Well, we will move on to item number 4, which is an update on the potential commercial tax abatement program development.
Okay, let's see. I didn't include the map in your packet, but in your most recent information packet, this map was included that you see here. This is a map that shows, outlined in red, our new opportunity zones that were implemented in 2017. But the purpose of this illustration today is to show you, outlined in blue, the areas for potential tax abatement, commercial tax abatement areas that staff has been working on for several months. The purpose of providing these commercial tax abatement areas would be to inspire our commercial property owners in some of these areas. You can see primarily along Highway 1, 6, and 218 to reinvest in their properties, whether that would be to improve existing properties or to build something new on those properties. This is a way outside of the more significant or politically weighty TIF to help other business owners in the community to make improvements and breathe new life into what in some cases may be tired properties, and have the city be able to assist with a property tax abatement. Now, some of the we're not far enough along to bring this to council yet, but some of the things that staff is working on will include the amount of tax abatement and exactly how it works. So typically, a property owner in a tax abatement would have to improve their property value by at least 15% to be eligible. We're strongly considering having only property that is taxed as commercial property, in other words, no residential, be eligible for this. Our residential properties being quite well able to keep themselves going in this community with our housing market. Commercial properties, perhaps not so much. Another aspect of tax abatement is to consider how long of an abatement we might offer. A typical one would be either a sliding scale over 5 or 10 years, sliding scale beginning at, say, for example, 80% of the increase in the property valuation you've created, abating, say, 80%, and then 70, 60, 50, and so on, down through either 5 years or 10 years. Another consideration would be to do a 100% tax abatement over a very short period of time. That's another option. And you can actually offer the choice to people who would participate in this as well. A common one is 3 years of a 100% property tax abatement. So staff is still working on that. I thought I would try to put a sort of a size and shape around what that would mean in terms of maybe a typical $1 million property in that area. Say they increase their property by 15%. You take out the land value, make sure you take out the land value and any residential components there might be to it. And if you've got that 15%, and in this case, say it's $150,000 worth of improvements, a 1-year 100% tax exemption would be somewhere around $6,000. So we're not talking buckets and shiploads of money, but we're talking about enough that might be a little bit of an inspiration for somebody to make an improvement on their property. So that's what we're working on now, and we've got on our calendars that we want to bring that back to you in August. But we'd be happy to take any input you might have on the idea, for one, and any questions you might have about the whole concept.
I do have a couple questions that derive from conversations that I've participated in, and Jeff has, with the president of the university and other conversations with some other local economic development officials. I have said in those meetings that I don't believe we need to be putting tax incentives into economic development solely for the purpose of developing our economy. Now, I want to try to be careful in talking about this because I want to be precise. Instead, I think we need to recognize the climate emergency is the word I'm now hearing a lot, the climate emergency that we face along with other people on the rest of this planet, and also concerns about lower income people, low to moderate income people, in terms of trying to make sure that whatever economic development we do benefits them, that they would be the priority. So two things are on my mind. One is that any economic development incentives we provide should, in part, be designed to get the property or company getting the benefit to be on track toward reducing its carbon emissions. So that's one thing. And that also somehow there should be some clear benefit for low to moderate income households. And what I'm thinking of, the highest priority I can think of with regard to low to moderate income households is childcare. So what I'm thinking, and I don't know how well it fits with this, but what I'm thinking is, in the future, all of our economic development incentives should get properties and companies on the glide path toward achieving our 2050 climate action goals and be on a track toward helping low to moderate income people get the kind of child care they need so that they can go to work and be improving their lives and helping to develop the economy from below. So I know that complicates things, but it definitely is what I've been thinking.
I would just say that this is a very difficult tool to accomplish those kind of objectives because the tax abatement schedule goes into place when you've got your commercial, your value increase, and then it continues without any action by the city. It's not like a rebate where they're having to show they did A, B, C, and D, and then they get their rebate every year. It's a very difficult thing to do, an enforcement mechanism nightmare to do it with this particular type of tax incentive.
Fair enough. I totally understand that what I was suggesting is complicated and maybe not viable with regard to this.
I'm just telling you, this is not a very good tool for that kind of, for addressing that kind of thing. It's going to be very difficult to do that with this tool and do it effectively.
And though it wouldn't be tailored specifically to businesses owned by low to moderate income individuals, the goal is that we're really addressing commercial areas that, say, don't have the underlying value, that it's more single-story retail and more affordable business areas that ideally we can inspire some investment that will make those more suitable retail locations or commercial locations for businesses that maybe can't afford to be in office space downtown. So kind of ancillary benefit there, but that's part of the goal of this. And Eleanor's right that once it's in place, it's by right, and so that makes it very different than TIF, where there's more negotiations with those asking for incentives.
Well, I'm interested to see what we can do, because I think there's an awful lot of underutilized commercial spaces in this city.
I agree.
And certainly not just downtown. I mean, I think some of them maybe that are empty downtown are just that the rents are so high because of so much of the demand downtown that you take. A lot of businesses can't afford that. And then you start looking out around the community, and I've personally been looking at office space. And depending upon the quality of office space a person or business needs, there's a lot of it that it's just not usable, particularly, say, for a professional office. I mean, if you're looking at attorneys or CPAs or, in my field, financial services people, you just drive by some of these buildings and it's like, no, as professionals, we're not going to ask clients to be coming to this building because it just doesn't have the image that as a professional service provider you need to project. Now, I'm not saying all of them should be or could be used for that purpose, but I think anytime you get, business owners, depending, you need some nice looking areas and nice looking facilities. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Simon, and there's a lot of these smaller places that maybe that abatement could be what they need to, incentivize some improvement, because there's a lot of them, I think, that are sitting empty because of that type of thing. So it would be just interesting to see what this might spark. And while I appreciate your thoughts, Jim, because I totally agree this child care issue is a huge one in terms of economic development and people being able to work, et cetera, and also the climate action. From what Eleanor's saying, it sounds like we might be needing to look at some different kinds of strategies and motivators for that type of stuff.
Yeah, I think they're good comments, and I'm speaking without knowing as much as the folks next to me. But I think we could, if the council determined that there were higher priority uses, you can create different scales. So, for example, you may get a 3-year abatement with a retail use, but if you build a child care center, you might get an 8-year. If we want to value particular uses over another, the sustainability component's a little bit tougher to do, but we can certainly look at that, and whether there's some requirement to it has to be well-defined is the challenge, and each property is going to be a little unique. So, but if there's something that we can define that says you have to do X, Y, or Z in order to qualify, we can look at that. But that's going to be more challenging. I think the use side is maybe a little bit easier if we wanted to target some type of business. The last thing I'll say, I think this dovetails really nicely with the retail consultant that we brought on board. I don't think we've started that project yet, have we?
Just kicked it off last week.
Just kicked it off last week. So as we're engaging with property owners about, potential new tenants or what types of investments they may need to do in their property to attract new tenants, if we had a tool like this, that could be one more layer to incent them to build value on their property.
Well, with regard to the child care part, it would be crucial, I think, to connect with, sorry, I'm blanking out temporarily, Manette Jacoby and others who are working on child care for the county and all the other agencies that are involved in that, to figure out some way that we could use financial incentives, maybe in the way that you just described, Jeff, to enable construction and operation of more of those kinds of facilities so that people who need child care can actually have access to it in an affordable way. I believe that's crucial. With regard to the climate action part of it, I don't know how this could play out, but Jeff and I just took part this morning, and Ashley took part this morning in a meeting with climate strikers from the local schools, and understand their passion and commitment and understand where they're coming from. And I think we're all very conscious of what seems to be very clearly a change in climate that's having pretty massive effects on weather already, and that we have a responsibility to play our part in that. And I know that sometime in July, this hasn't really been discussed thoroughly, but sometime in July in one of our work sessions, we're going to focus attention on the current status of our climate action and our response to the draft resolution that the climate strikers presented and other information that comes aboard. But we have to be figuring out how to link our economic development activities to our climate action objectives. Maybe this isn't the right tool, but we got to figure it out. And we'll be cutting new ground if we do.
Along those same lines, maybe it's a little bit different because you use the child care example as a use that perhaps you could have a longer child care or longer tax abatement if you had a child care use. Would you also be able to do the same thing, for example, if people elected to do renewable energy infrastructure, to essentially give a longer abatement if they did that, and everyone would have the right to do that by right? I mean, would that be possible, or is that maybe more complicated, or is it maybe the enforcement mechanism that's more difficult?
I think that it's possible. The key would be that they also make other improvements that increases their value, that 15%. I think that the challenge that we were seeing, if you make it specifically for renewable energy, is that those improvements wouldn't necessarily increase the value enough to qualify under the state law for the tax abatement. But if they had other improvements that then they added, say, a solar component to, perhaps we could extend the abatement period for that other increase in value.
And I know it's probably
in a bigger
really hard to predict this, but any sense at all in terms of what the average increment would be? Because if we're talking about a $6,000 property tax, we also don't want a situation where any requirements would swamp the value of the incentive. So obviously we're aware of that. But any sense at all in terms of what the average would be, or is it just more, we're pretty confident we're going to get some new development there? Or is it, we'll just have to sort of wait and see?
I think largely we're going to have to wait and see.
Okay.
We've intentionally kept the geographic areas small because it's by right and we don't have experience working with it. We were afraid of making it too generous off the bat and apply to too many areas perhaps that would have seen investment anyway. So we tried to keep it narrowly tailored, and I think that we'll probably start the same way with the abatement schedule, that make the parameters as conservative as we can and still have some expectation that it'll get used, and then over time, as we see how it's used, perhaps we can broaden it a little bit.
It's a very difficult tool to tailor to a specific project because you have to say, A, B, C, D criteria entitles you to the abatement, and you say that up front. So
It's not a project by project.
it's not a project-by-project tool. I can see perhaps a climate, something that is built into a building when it's built is going to be an easier situation because once it's there, as opposed to some ongoing use, like a daycare provider or something.
Well, like heat pumps. That would be an example of something that would be built into a project from the get-go and stay with the project for a long time.
Because along with the climate action strikers, I know one of the things that's often brought up is this question of requiring renewable energy, which is preempted under state law. So if there were some other tools, I think it's good for us to think about that in terms of the incentives, about whether we'd be able to do that while making sure that we wouldn't swamp the value of the incentive in the first place.
Okay, I think that's a helpful conversation, and so
Absolutely.
thanks to all of you.
Thank you. And we'll come back, as Wendy said, we'll come back to you in the coming months with proposed parameters, and those will be open for discussion at that time, too.
Okay.
I think an important thing to go back to is the example that Wendy gave at the beginning. I mean, you talk about $150,000 increase in value, so assuming it's cost them $150,000 out of their pocket to get that $150,000 increase in valuation. And I realize that's not always exactly the same.
Yep.
But let's, for sake of argument, say that, and they're getting a 6,000, if I remembered, 6,000 something would be 100% abatement, okay?
1 year.
For 1 year.
You can do it up to 10 years.
Right. So, with that, there's, yeah, I mean, if you went up to 10 years, then that's theoretically 60-something, or maybe over, that over the 10 years. But, when you look at that, unless it is that full 10 years or more than just 1 year, they're still spending a fair amount of money out of their own pocket above and beyond what they're going to get, in terms of an abatement. And then if you don't go the 100%, then it's, I mean, it in a way, it's almost something to me that somebody's probably going to do anyways, and this might be what kind of tips them over the edge to do it, kind of thing. It's not going to incentivize somebody probably to do something that they weren't ever thinking about from that standpoint. So, and then if you don't do the 100% abatement, you've got that increase in valuation, so then you're still collecting some additional taxes as well. So a lot of moving parts to it.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
Just an interesting timing with this meeting. I think in the Gazette today, there's commentary on the Cedar Rapids abatement program. They have a very liberal abatement program, and that's the debate in the paper, at least the way the story frames it. Is it too liberal? And they use it in some of their targeted growth areas too, and they include residential. So if you get a chance, look at that. Pay attention to the discussions there. Cities use it for a variety of different purposes, and you can see how they're using it and some of the questions that they're facing a few years into their experience with it.
And we have looked at it as well for its use in incentivizing affordable housing. There's also a memo in your packet from Tracy Haichu on that process. We worked with local developers as well. There is a committee. Again, not probably the best tool for it. It's not probably lucrative enough to incentivize the new production of units, but there are some parameters that we think could be workable for some areas of the community.
Great.
And so just as a reminder, Wendy, the only area that staff is looking at this for is in those blue areas, the tax abatement areas?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, just as a reminder, it's not citywide that it's being considered. So that right there would also limit what we might see. Okay. All right, thanks. Moving on to number 5, staff report.
I thought I'd give a brief report on Building Change. Building Change is our program to help downtown and north side businesses make improvements to their facades. We had 5 applications. 3 ended up qualifying, had projects that could move forward. 2 will be on Washington Street, and they'll be what I think you all will understand as the old Kresge building and the old Yonkers building. They will be doing facades. The Yonkers building, well, both have been reviewed by our historic preservation staff people who were concerned that if there were any, what was the word they used, significant architectural characteristics to the building that still existed under anything that is a facade now, then those elements would have to be incorporated into the final design. And in fact, on the Yonkers building, the gray tile that once covered the face of the building is all intact and under there, and is a significant architectural feature that the owners are now going to incorporate into their design and thus satisfy historic preservation. Kind of neat. Then the same owners own the Kresge building, and their design had originally included enlarging some windows on the second floor. I think that was the right one. And historic preservation did not agree with doing that because it changed the character of that building. The owner was fine with that and had to make some other changes to their facade design to accommodate the existing facade that is underneath, or the old facade that is underneath the current facade, that isn't architecturally significant from before. So it's been kind of an interesting.
Glad we have experts in this
Yeah, I
area.
know, absolutely.
This sounds like archaeology instead of architecture.
It is, building
Defer their
archaeology.
judgment on that.
Wendy, just for the record, could you explain what the old Kresge and Yonkers buildings are, just so it's in the record, please?
Yes, I wish I had the address. The old Kresge building is approximately, hopefully I have this right, the 119 to 123 East Washington Street, and the old Yonkers building is just to the west of that. And I'm not going to guess on the numbers.
The old brown bottle.
The old brown bottle, thank you. That's a good description.
People more,
was
that
gonna say.
that still might not read
I
that.
spent a lot of time with
But
that.
still, I think just the idea for people, if somebody were to be listening to this or looking, if we have transcribed minutes, I don't know if we do, but basically, you're on the south side of Washington Street to the east of Midwest 1, and to the west of Jefferson. I know it's narrower than that, but still it's in that
Yeah, the two
vicinity.
largest buildings in that block
Yeah.
that aren't the corner buildings.
Yeah, so just kind of give somebody some frame of reference if they're
Right,
not
right.
familiar with the others.
So those two projects are eligible for up to $100,000, the maximum building change for the two buildings. Then the other project is on Clinton Street, and that's the McDonald Optical Building, and they're doing a full renovation of the brick facade, a repainting, and they're doing much more than that as well, but the parts of the project that qualify for building change are the facade. And so you'll see new paint and and tuck pointing to make those bricks look a lot better than they do. And that's, in their project, actually, the qualifying parts of that did not come up to the $50,000 match. It was more like a $22,000 match or so on that one.
Okay, great.
Very good.
Yeah.
Anything for anybody else, staff?
Do you have anything, Erica?
Committee time. Anything for committee members?
Not really.
No? Any other business from anybody? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Cole, seconded by Throgmorton. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much,
All right.
everybody.
All right.